Hey everybody, how you doing? This is xrp.spartan, and this is crypto, so let's get into it. We have Bitcoin coming in at $27,905, Ethereum at $1,861.72. We got XRP coming in at a little low on the chart here, that little dipsy doodle over here, 43 cents. Let's check on Casper. We got Casper coming in and hitting 5 cents, so we're down about 10% on the 7-day, 8% of it in the last 24 hours, so the market is bleeding off. I mean, from what I've learned, this is try to catch us on the downtrend and sell on the uptrend. Speaking of that, I wanted to go into this today real quick before we get into the history of money part 2. This is a tweet I've seen, and this is what happens to people out here all the time. This is not financial advice. You can do whatever you want with your tokens, money. I'm not saying anything, but there's people out here that just get wrecked from chasing green candles. He traded all his XRP for Pepcoin. This is why I don't advise anyone to trade their XRP or play around with meme coins. It's very sad. This gentleman sent a message saying, "Hey Edo, please help me. I traded all my XRP into Pep a few days ago, hoping it would go up, but I ended up losing more than 60%. What should I do now? Sell it all or wait until it goes back up again? Thanks." I mean, that's really sad. I mean, it says right here, if you're not a regular swing trader, you need to learn how to set it and forget it. Is pretty much how I put it. I mean, unless you know what you're doing out here. Anyway, let's get into this. Let's watch this video. Digital Perspectives Permabull over here. Congratulations on XRP Las Vegas 23. Totally looking forward to XRP 2024. I will be there this go around. Promise you that. I caught a lot of hell for this. This one, sometimes the right path isn't always the shortest one, but it's one worth taking. To be honest with you, that's kind of why I stuck with it, because XRP was kind of the hard way to go. But let's go ahead and give this a listen.
If the Ripple case gets to the Supreme Court of the United States, I believe it is highly likely that Ripple wins and the SEC loses. It's dicey to predict what one particular federal judge will or will not do with massive contrasting motions for summary judgment. But as Ripple, and I hate to say it, this is going to take more time, as Ripple goes to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals and then to the United States Supreme Court, I like their chances a lot.
What would you say is the number one thing they bring in terms of their defense to the Supreme Court that you feel, hey, this is a good probability they could win this?
It's the big question. It's the ultimate question. That is, the SEC lacks authority from Congress to regulate in this space. It is the major questions doctrine. There are 6 votes at the Supreme Court right now for this major questions doctrine, which says if you are going to claim the authority to regulate a massive industry and a new asset class, you have got to get that authority from Congress. And it's exactly what Gary Gensler said in May of 2021. He was right then. He's wrong now. But there's 6 votes for that. And I think this is a perfect case of a major question that can only be settled by Congress.
So we know that the SEC, at the last 6 attempts they've taken cases to the Supreme Court, they've lost 5 out of the 6. This waiting game, it's been stall for as long as possible. Even if Ripple wins, they're going to do whatever they can to keep kicking the can down the road That's all they've done. Gary Gensler's a bully in this market. He's trying to take over for the incumbents. We see Fidelity coming out with custody. NASDAQ's coming out with custody. Everybody in the market's building. It's just, it's insane. But I want to keep this moving along because I don't want to make the video too long today. So we got Digital Asset Investor. Shout out to him. I wanted to go ahead and play this video. We got, I like this. John Deaton's grilling the dude from, I think this is the gentleman for Coinbase attorney. Like, dude, what's up with these double standards? I just watched the video. It's great.
The argument that you're making about secondary sales equally applies to XRP. And yet XRP was suspended. And then we see a case against Bittrex where the SEC says algo is also a security. And of course, there isn't a suspension of that. And so do you understand where, as an XRP holders, that they get frustrated or even angry that they're penalized? Not that anyone wants you to delist algo or suspend algo. Let me make that clear. I just do, know what's your thoughts on that, sir?
No, I do understand that frustration. And look, I get it. People.
And he's getting ready to do a bunch of legal acrobats, talking in circles, basically saying, oh, well, we're trying to abide by the law and the rules are always changing. It's just a bunch of BS this guy's spitting, man. It's just, that's my son yelling in the background. He needs me.
People can be passionate about these issues, and the rhetoric can sometimes get heated. But I understand where folks are coming from, and I also can understand why it can feel like there's a double standard that's being applied in a variety of circumstances. The law evolves, circumstances evolve. As the chair himself likes to say, facts and circumstances constantly change.
Did he just quote Gary Gensler? Is that who you're working off of? I don't even want to listen to that anymore. Alright, so I want to keep this little segment I had going on, Extra History Part 2, for the history of paper money. And then I'll also try to look for something in the meantime for what the future of money looks like, which I believe we all kind of get a good understanding of how that's going. But I'm going to go ahead and roll this for you.
The idea that Marco Polo brought pasta to Italy from the East, there's another marvel that the book about his travels popularized. It was an idea, a radical one, which is perhaps best summarized by the very title of the chapter that discusses it. For in the Book of the Marvels of the World, or as we know it, The Travels of Marco Polo, there's a chapter titled, How the Great Khan Caused the Bark of Trees, Made into Something Like Paper, to Pass for Money Throughout His Realm. In ancient China, they invented a coinage system, where the coins had holes punched in them. So if you needed to measure out large denominations, you could just run a string through the center of the coins, and a particular length of string would hold 100 or 1,000 at once. But over time, the economy evolved, transactions got bigger, and merchants found themselves needing tens or hundreds of thousands of coins to complete transactions. And of course, a strand of 1,000 of these weighed about 10 pounds already, so it became a real pain in the neck to transport them. So the government started saying, how about we pay you pieces of paper that have the amount of coins we owe you written on them, and you can come pick up your coins at the Capitol whenever you want your money. And since the government bought a lot of things, these paper slips started being circulated everywhere. Soon, merchants realized that these slips of paper were always good, that they could be turned in at the Capitol for however much was written on them whenever they wanted. So heck, why even go to the trouble of turning them in? Why not just trade the slips of paper to other merchants for their goods? Thus, the merchants began using these promissory notes, or essentially government IOUs, as money. And then the government caught on and simply started printing up money. So by the time we got the Travels of Marco Polo, paper money was widespread, and this idea started to catch on even outside of China. Sometimes with little success, like when Gekatu, the corrupt Ikan of the Middle East, tried to introduce paper money after he'd already splurged the royal money, and had his economy collapse to a cow plague. He basically fell prey to the misconception that simply printing money was literally a way to print money. Needless to say, he was promptly strangled with a bowstring. But sometimes, in other places, the idea started to take stronger hold, especially Italy. The Italian city-states had already been playing with this idea a little. They were the economic dynamos of Europe, and the first truly great trading cities on the continent since the ancient world. They were also basically always at war. This made carrying around great heaping piles of cash a wee bit of a danger. So the merchants came up with a new system, influenced by the tales from China. At first, they began simply issuing promissory notes, basically IOUs. Merchants would get to a new town and stock up on supplies and trade goods, but rather than carrying the cash to pay for them across dangerous country, they would just give the seller an IOU, often backed by a very famous or wealthy merchant, promising to pay for the goods at a later date. But here's the trick. To keep anybody from having to haul all that money around, the merchant wouldn't ever actually end up paying the seller directly. Instead, he would just pay a bank in his hometown. Here's how it would work. The merchant selling the goods would take the promissory note he got for them to his local bank, which he had access to, unlike most of Europe, because the Crusades had accidentally created modern banking. Why let a little crusade get in the way of a good story about fiscal instruments? So, he would take the note down to the bank and cash it in for slightly less than its face value. Basically, the bank was buying the note from him for some amount less than it was worth. Then the bank, which would have branches in other cities, would send a rider with a stack of these notes out to whatever specific city those notes had originally come from. When the rider got to the city, he would hand them to the local branch of the bank, and then the local branch would go collect from the merchant who had bought the goods. So the merchant could pay for goods in a far-off location by paying his local bank after the fact. A pretty huge step forward for commerce. But what if the bank didn't have a branch in the merchant's hometown? Well, then the bank would just sell the promissory note to another bank that did have one there. So these promissory notes sort of started to take on a value of their own. People started trading these notes, and soon the banks got in on the action and just let you take out notes from the bank itself if you had the deposits to cover it. But this didn't reach its full form for quite some time. Fast forward about 300 years and move halfway across the continent to the little island hanging off of Italy's side. The year is 1640. The never popular Charles I's monarchy is deeply in debt. He had gotten into a tiff with the parliament and basically disbanded it for over a decade. But according to English law, parliament is the only group allowed to levy taxes, which you do need when you're a king and flat broke. But not Charles. No. He had all sorts of crazy schemes for bringing in money without calling on Parliament. So miffed he was at them. And in 1640, we have one fine example. He just seized all the money in the mint. And this is kind of a big deal because it wasn't his money in the mint. All the merchants and the goldsmiths of London deposited their hard currency at the mint, just as a place to store it. So the king just picked up all that cash and declared it to be another one of his ever-popular forced loans. And then he proceeded to also seize all of the East India Company's pepper, just to add a strange, if somewhat delectable twist to this tale. Needless to say, his head was promptly separated from his body, which leaves us in the aftermath with a bunch of merchants and goldsmiths. The merchants and goldsmiths got together, and the goldsmiths basically said, "Look, we have these giant vaults for storing all of our gold. If you want to pay us a small amount, you can rent a corner of the vault to put all of your money in." This rapidly evolved to the goldsmiths paying people small amounts of interest to leave their money with them in exchange for the right to lend it out. This basically made them into banks. And in their capacity as banks, when people would deposit their money, the goldsmiths would basically give the depositor a receipt, which they could turn back in to claim their money. But soon, these goldsmiths made a pivotal switch. They changed from making out receipts, which could only be redeemed by the person who originally made the deposit, to also offering receipts that could be redeemed by whomever held them. This allowed people to start using their receipts as currency. Rather than pay for something with a pile of coins, why not just put that pile of coins in the bank and pay for stuff with these far more convenient receipts? Of course, as soon as they started doing this, people began to ask for multiple receipts in small, regular denominations. So you'd go to the bank, you'd drop off 20 quid, and ask the nice fellow at the register to give you 20 receipts for £1 apiece, so that you could go out and buy some vegetables or something with them. As soon as you do that, you basically have the banknote, the fundamental form of paper money. And the goldsmiths were clever folk. They started to notice the funny thing about banknotes. These banknotes were starting to get passed around from hand to hand without often getting handed back in at the bank, which meant that the bankers could keep playing around with the money those notes were supposed to represent even as they circulated through the markets. After all, so long as everybody doesn't try to turn in their banknotes at once, the bank can lend more money than it actually has in its vaults. While one banknote is circulating its way from hand to hand, the bank can use the coins that note represents to cover somebody else turning their banknote in. And thus, fractional reserve banking was born, instantly expanding the money supply of England, but not without introducing some dangers. Join us next time as we move from these Wild West beginnings to the
Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the video today. I'm going to cut it a little short, and I hope this kind of shows you guys how the banking systems are developed, and they still use the same concept. I mean, this is the 1600s and they're still pushing the same BS, and they're getting ready to change it again. But please hit that like and subscribe, and remember, this is not financial advice, and catch all you guys later. Thanks.